Hey, Hannah, thank you for coming in. You really have a great background, very entrepreneurial, but also these amazing contributions that you're doing, leading things like AF for Good, product design, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership, migration, climate change, and Oxfam, Mexico, and international, German representative to the UN. So we want to mine all of these different things that you've been doing through your life. And so I really appreciate you sharing your insights with my audience.
Wow, thank you so much, Stephen. Honestly, thank you so much for having me. When we met in person a few months ago, I was really impressed and very interested in the work that you do. So honestly, I'm very honored to just be here.
So, my audience is always curious about, what were those three magic moments in your life? And it could have been when you're 3 or 5 or 10, or it could be inside or outside the family, could have been in school or career moves. Those three things that help shape this marvelous person you are today.
Wow. That's a very big question. I think for me, an extremely clear inflection point is related to how I grew up. So I come from a very small town in Germany where not a lot of things are going on. And what happened to me with that was that I felt a lot of frustration growing up. I didn't have a lot of inspiration around me, and I felt like the world was very small. But in my ideas and in the things that I was reading, I said, there has to be so much more. And for me, the biggest inflection point was leaving. And what I did first, because I didn't have this inspiration, was I decided to travel for a year. So I first earned some money to be able to do that. And then I traveled a lot through West Africa, which was, of course, a complete shock. But I got in touch with so many people, so many experiences that like real people had, not traveling as a tourist, you know? And I think there I had a huge mind blowing moment where I got ill and I was in bed for a really long time. And I started reflecting what I had been observing. And I came to this point where I thought, wow, I come from this country where, of course, everybody, will donate for kids in Africa and
Yeah.
care about the poor. But then I started observing that the real problems that people were having were related deeply to trade agreements and to political systems and to relations with other countries. And in that moment, I said, so I think what I want to do is work in impact on a global scale. I don't really know and what and how, but like that was a huge inflection point that I'm very grateful for to be able to live. Yeah, so that was a big one. Then a second one was that I went into this international development world because I thought that was where I wanted to be. And I was with a think tank in Brussels, and then I went to Geneva with the UN, and I went to London for my master's. And I was like, I want to get out of this ivory tower, so I go to Mexico to work for Oxfam, and I loved it. I learned a lot. I think I was really lucky to get all these opportunities, but at some point I got very frustrated because I felt like this world is trying to solve a million problems, but they are not focusing. They are trying to do it all at the same time. And because they see everything in such a systemic way, they are unable to say, no, we are just going to focus on this one thing and we're going to be the best and we will solve it. We will find a solution that becomes scalable, that becomes even scalable beyond what we can do, that we can replicate on a global level. So there I started seeing like, okay, maybe the direction I have to go into is more into tech, into AI, into entrepreneurship that is able to take that focus. And around that time, I founded the predecessor of Intrare, and I quit. I started doing that. That I think I'm also really grateful for it because I think sometimes having this shock, like realizing that something has to change, is really great. And then like there are lots of points I think where I got like much deeper into the AI world as well. But I would say like another, like for me very personally, a big inflection point has been quite gradually over the past 12 months. And it started nearly exactly a year ago, where I went on a leadership journey with 40 incredible people to Israel, actually. And I realized, observing a lot of people that were just a little bit older than me, or like quite a bit older than me, that had achieved incredible things, be it in innovation, in social impact. And I started opening up and feeling like, I think I've limited myself a lot, because I often feel like I'm not good enough at this, I'm not good enough at that. There's always someone better at something than you. And I really started realizing there's so many possibilities, that if I let go of a lot of those insecurities that are unnecessary, and let go of like maybe the need to be recognized for what I do, I can really give much more, and work at a bolder scale. I think that's a really good word. And I feel like that process actually concluded in the past days, because I'm just coming back from a 10-day silence retreat, where I had really a chance that you don't get a lot as an entrepreneur. Taking 10 days to be in silence is not something you usually do, but that really gave me a chance to say, I'm going to change a lot of things. So I've started holding a salon to discuss ideas that I think are interesting and important. I'm writing on different topics. I'm working on bringing different like minds and ideas together. So that's been for me like an opening up moment, where I think I can go much, much, much beyond just like being an entrepreneur and doing what I've been doing so far.
That's really, really fascinating. So let's go back in time again. And you indicated you grew up in a small German town. And were your parents, like, what was that kind of home environment like? Was it sort of education focused, or was it entrepreneurial focused, or quite the opposite? What was that kind of environment like?
Yeah, what a great question. My parents, I think in a lot of ways they couldn't be more different than me. My father is a goldsmith, and he worked in the town I was born, I think, for over 20 years. My mom was a teacher, and they were definitely not so entrepreneurial. They were, I think, living quite a happy life, though. I think they are people that are not that materialistic. Like they never had a lot of money. They were actually below the poverty line for quite some years when I was young, but I never felt that it's a scarcity. So I think we're very, as you say, education focused, and they're very nature focused. So I think I received a lot of, like being content and being happy with that. And I'd say that rather became a struggle growing up, because neither them nor teachers nor other people around had ambition to do big things. And I'd say like that was much more complicated.
So that's really, really fascinating. A goldsmith and a teacher, and very much into nature and things like that. And not so materialistic, but education as well. And when you were very young, what were the things that interested you? Like, did you like the arts or the sciences, or a little bit of mix of everything? What was your passion from a study standpoint before you went to university?
That's a great question. I think I was interested in everything. And I think an issue that my parents used to describe was that I never finished anything, because I started so many things and I got excited about so many things. And then I'd say I got a lot in high school. I got a lot into fields of philosophy, languages. I'd say like anything that explores ideas a bit deeper. Mm, yeah, but I think overall, I felt like school was often a lot focused on just complying with what teachers had to teach us. Not so much focused on going deeper and just understanding something, not for the grade or for compliance. So yeah, I think that's interesting. And of course, there are fields that I was super interested in, like political science, economics, that we got like very, very small classes every once in a while on. But yeah, for sure, that fascinated me most.
So kind of like a generalist, but also really interested in everything. You indicated philosophy and economics, and in your philosophical kind of thinking, excuse me, did you think about consciousness and spirituality? Did you get really, really broad or esoteric in your kind of philosophical interest?
Interesting. I think I always got very much into why do humans think the way we think. So interestingly, a teacher in high school taught us about phenomenology, which is not, it's like very, I'd say very out there. It's quite complicated. Like speaking on like how the world is just what we perceive. But also very much into what I later understood is political theory, and that I then also went into study in my master's. That really says, okay, we often just scratch the surface of why we think a certain system, a certain political system, or a certain economical system is good for people, and we should live like that. But why? And it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and how it affects humans, how should humans develop themselves to create better systems to live in. So I think that was what I was always most interested in.
So you're in high school and you have all of these different interests. And I have German friends or friends in Central Europe, and they tend to be very kind of methodical and very conservative. So it sounds like you weren't sort of in sync. I always get this impression as very conservative societies, right? So, whereas you're kind of a forward thinking. And so when you went to college, what you study there, I know you got a master's from the London School of Economics, which is one of the top schools in the world. So did you do pre-studies in college prior to that, or were you able to just go directly to get your master's degree? What was that educational journey like once you finished high school?
Yeah, so I mean, finishing high school, I went on this trip for a whole year, and then right there, I'd say like when I was in Ghana, I decided I think I want to study political science. That was the first part. I think what I meant at that moment was actually economics, but I didn't have such a clear idea. And in Germany, this kind of study of economics is not so, I think it's not so common. Nobody was really talking about that. So I went to do my BA in that. And I realized very fast in the beginning, I liked it a lot, but I also felt like it wasn't that intellectually challenging. And for some reason, very early on, I heard from a friend about London School of Economics. And I was in third semester. So I still had a long time to go, but I said, I will go to London School of Economics. So I needed to get a scholarship. So I became student council president, and I was in a lot of committees as president and did a lot of things. And I worked a lot of jobs at the same time. And so like, I'm going to do it. And that was maybe not very smart. You should have more options for yourself. So yeah, I don't know if I would recommend that, but I think in the end, it was really good to have that goal because I was looking forward to it so much. And then I guess I got also really lucky getting in there.
It's interesting. You finish high school and then you spend a year in Africa, and it really shook you up, right? Because you're so used to a particular kind of life in Europe, which is totally different in Africa. And it opened your eyes. And because you're curious and because you're a very broad thinker, right? Philosophy, political science, economics, a lot of things interest you, then you'd be curious about the differences and why those differences are there. And it opened up this whole impact part of you, and you got ill as well. So then, and that would have shaped I can see how these are transition points in who you are today. And that shock, I'm guessing you realize that you really lived kind of an isolated life in Germany, right? Because you're not aware of all of this, and that's why it was awakening for you. And So it did it sort of uh, have an emotional, it must have had an emotional impact that year that you were in Africa, and when you got ill as well, must have shaped you from an emotional standpoint. And what was that journey like, that kind of emotional awakening together with this sort of conscious awakening that you went through?
That is so interesting. I think no one ever asked me that question. Yeah, it's a really good point. So I would say that having that realization, for one, I think it liberated me of a position that I had taken of being the rebel, because I wasn't happy with everything. So I wouldn't accept my teachers that weren't inspiring me, nor my parents, nor anything. And I think saying like, oh, I am realizing I'm sort of like taking this veil of ignorance of the world that I'm living in. I think that gave me the freedom to say, now I can become a person that is doing something interesting in this really big world. And I think it gave me this curiosity again to like really coming back to that and feeling, wow, like there's a lot I really don't understand a lot. So probably I'll just take the next years where I am in university and studying, and that is really just exploration, right? So I'm going to take those and very freely explore lots of different things to start building that mental picture and start understanding where I want to contribute and where I could be passionate to work in. So that was for sure mentally a very, very big change.
Yeah, I mean, and then you get your BA and you study economics, and but it's in the European context. But the London School of Economics is so famous that you would have a much more broader international students studying there, and because it's such an elite school, then you would find the best in the world studying there, and you had to work for it. So it's not like it was given to you. You had to strive for it. You had to work for it. You had to you had to accomplish to get into that school, and that would shape you, because then you wouldn't take it for granted, right? It's not like it was handed to you, and that would give you resilience and the built and this capacity for hard work, and it'll give you gratitude as well. I mean, I'm guessing, because, especially with your time in Africa, because you realize the things you took for granted, you can't take anything for granted in Africa, many parts of Africa, right? Because people uh, just really extensive challenges and they have to overcome just to live day to day. And so I'm kind of guessing, I'm sort of brainstorming with you actively. So when you hit the London School of Economics, did you experience that, the kind of international perspective? But you see students from all different regions of the world there, and did you mix and try to curious to see what their experiences were like and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was an incredible experience. I think for one, I came to London School of Economics and I remember that the first 2 months I felt so stupid in class. And I loved it because I felt like that means I'm finally at the stage of learning where I wanted to be, like this intellectual expansion that I really wanted to reach. I'm listening to professors that understand things in such a profound and broad way at the same time that are so good. The students around me are brilliant. And I feel like that really that was my intellectual dream. Absolutely. And then after class, we would spend LSE has this pub on campus, and then everybody would go from the library to the pub, and we would continue our philosophical discussions. And I think that for me was really mind blowing, and I felt like in a sense I felt like I had arrived to a tribe where I felt like I really belonged. And at the same time, for sure, it was interesting to see students around me, of course, were completely different. One of the good friends that I made had been all his life to Oxford. His dad was a chair at LSE. And that was, of course, a completely different world, right? And even I think in comparing academical abilities, like his ability to write an essay was incomparable to mine, like much better. But I think that doesn't matter so much because you learn so much from each other. And because people come from so many different countries, discussions become really rich. I think, especially when you're discussing like with this amazing course on social justice or global justice that a really brilliant professor, Katrin Flickshoe, teaches. She's one of the best teachers I've had in my life by far. And she just pushed and pushed us to think further, and having people there from Chile and from Mexico and from the US and from China and, so many different contexts completely changes how you think, because people have different models of thinking. And it also, I think, like, helped me understand a lot that maybe if I thought before, a lot of things can be solved if only we find really good rational solutions to problems. I started realizing I'm in rooms with extremely intelligent people, and we all believe we're very rational. But you have people there that are very leftist, that are Marxist. You have people that are libertarian. So very clearly, there's also a lot going on that is much more intuitive that we're not so aware of. So I think that also helped me understand a lot. Like, if I want to work on interesting solutions, I'll have to understand how humans will implement them, how humans will understand them, how we approach anything like that. And I think is helping me a lot. For example, now that I work with a lot of companies in the day to day. So yeah, that was a very, very mind opening experience.
Yeah, and it would make you very inclusive and respect diversity, right? Because people, as you mentioned, come from different contexts, and they're not wrong. It's just different. But if you grew up in a particular kind of segment of society, then or there's a tendency to judge the world based on that very siloed view. And you think or people tend to think their position is right. But every person has that view wherever they come from. And then if you're in a diverse environment, or if you're willing to accept, then you think, wow, that's a different perspective. And there isn't any one perspective. Everybody has a different perspective, right? And you have to honor that perspective. So I could see that shaping again the things that you've done. So you worked in impact and new business strategies with Oxfam Mexico and Oxfam International, and then you worked as the German or with the German representation to the UN and think tanks and social impact organizations in Brussels and Geneva. Can you discuss any sort of learnings from that experience at all? Maybe good learnings and learnings where you think um, that awakened you again. And so I guess there's never any bad learning. So, what were the lessons that are useful that you learned from doing that Oxfam work and then the UN work and think tanks and social impact organizations in Brussels and Geneva? You probably would learn about things that don't work, and then you would learn about things that work. So there's got to be some lessons, right?
For sure, a lot. And like sometimes I think like how lucky I am to have that background, because now I'm in such an entrepreneurial world, and I think a lot of people have been in that around like for a long time. I think like one very big learning for sure was sitting in negotiations in the UN. And at that stage I was just taking notes and listening. I didn't have any important role at all. But I think you start realizing how difficult certain changes, and it's so hard to move topics forward, be it in human rights or be it in like achieving certain economic changes, and the way in which interests interlink, and like a lot of things don't even become about, is it good for my country to implement this or to sign this resolution so we can all implement better education programs. It may become more about right now, we are all like maybe in certain more southern countries, we're going to support China because they are more relevant for us economically in the future. So you start realizing how hard a lot of changes. And I think it's really interesting because right now I see a lot of people around me that are extremely frustrated about why politics is not achieving more in climate change. And I think we lack an understanding of how hard it is. It's so hard to reach global change in these topics. And I think I don't have a solution to that, but I think like we are too stuck. We're too much in using ways that to me seem like they've been used for decades or decades. Like since the Second World War ended, people have been talking in the same way, and it's not going to create, I think, a society of the future. I think that's one. And then something else that I learned in Oxfam that I really appreciated. It's not what I want to do in life, but what they do really well is that they understand. Okay, sometimes there are, as I'm saying, like these huge political challenges. So, for example, in Mexico, there's a huge problem with fiscal policy that exacerbates inequalities in the country. So you have a lot of income inequality here and wealth inequality. There's a bit unnecessary. So let's say just in fiscal policy, they will understand what is needed to change. That's very hard. Administrations in Mexico are never interested in doing fiscal policy change. So they will really work out how can we shift the way that parties think, not just one government, because we may not be able to change it in just 6 years, but how do different people and parties think and like move that change forward? And they've had a lot of successes, both in Mexico, where it's like a very local organization. It's led by Mexicans and in many other countries. And I think I gain a lot of respect for that. I think we often think that NGOs are sort of like doing a lot of hippie work and like very nice things, but like that I think is an extremely important role that I think didn't realize was so powerful.
So you're doing this work, and then you decide to become an entrepreneur, and there was a predecessor to your. So can you describe in a chronological sense your entrepreneurial journey to where you are today, and lessons that you learned? So what made you decide I'm going to work for a startup, or I'm going to do a startup? I mean, because that's a big shift from working with these NGOs and things like that, right? The thinking is different. And I know because when I brought the idea of AI for Good, or AI, or to support SDGs to the UN, to see if we could do something with it, I almost had to train them to think like a business, right? If you have a big idea and you want that idea to succeed, then you've got to treat it like a business, and execute on a business, and have what we call SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, and keep this cadence. In fact, I met every week, and we would drive towards this summit and things like that. And it was a startup, so you had to get that startup mentality like a business. And so that's a big shift. And I don't know, what drove you to do this? And you talked about it before, right? Because people work on systemic change, and it's just the ocean is so, they're boiling the ocean, and you think they should focus on a particular problem and then solve that problem. Is that the entrepreneurial? That's the entrepreneurial side that that attracted you to go in that direction?
Yeah, 100%. So I had that feeling, and I felt like, how much can I achieve here? After some point, I really want to focus, and I like solving problems. I really, really like that, and I think my mind is very much like that. And I like problems that are unsolved. And one problem that had been really, really haunting me for a while was that before I left Germany, still there was this influx of Syrians, and there was a lot of welcoming and a lot of hate. Then I go to London, and Brexit happens. And that was also in large part because of rejection of migrants from Eastern Europe. That's not often highlighted, but I think it was number 2 reason for people to vote for breakfast, for Brexit. Sorry. So I see that then Trump wins. So we see the same issue of really division and hate in the West, the opposite of inclusion, I would say. And I came to Mexico, and what I found really interesting was that Mexico at that point, I'd say like in terms of diversity and inclusion, what I thought was really interesting was that migrants tend to be the most difficult group. Like they always generate hate in a part of the population. And in Mexico, you had hundreds of thousands of people coming, and people were so unclear about it that they thought everybody went to the US, but that was never true. A lot of people always stay in Mexico if it's irregular because they can't get documents or regular. So start seeing like there's this openness, but at the same time, there is nothing happening here to make inclusion happen. Companies don't even know what a migrant or refugee is, right? So they won't hire them. There's like no inclusion happening. And I had this idea that like maybe was very much from my political theory thing. I was like, well, if we take this country that is not so negative and we manage really, really good inclusion between these, let's say, people coming as outsiders, like migrants, refugees, and then other diverse groups, and bring them in a really good way into good jobs, that not only helps them, it also really, like, for sure changes how people think in companies and society. And then I would like to replicate that to other countries. So very much without knowing at all how to be an entrepreneur, I had that idea. We started, I just got some people on board to help me give some training to some refugees. And I contacted some organizations that did humanitarian work with them. So, and then WeWork, for some reason, donated us space. And we did this first workshop there with 5 migrants. And it's really interesting because it was so successful and people were drawn to it so much that we got a lot of demand from a lot of refugees, migrants. We started working directly with companies because we figured it made sense, but it was very much like an organic growth of the idea. And then at some point we got offered funding from the German Development Agency, GIZ, and from the UN organization, IOM. And I felt like, wow, they for sure don't know that we don't actually have a team working on this. So what I did was, negotiate with them, create the projects, we signed, and then I quit and I hired 2 people. And that was the moment, I suppose, I actually became a full-time entrepreneur. And from there, it's a pretty long journey how we got to where we are now, because we're really a totally different company, but still like now going for achieving inclusion really at scale. Let's say that key steps were scaling the initial I'd say program that we had. And what we did with that was that we worked with over 80 companies for some years. We understood really well what do companies need to hire diverse people and to do it successfully so people don't quit because they feel uncomfortable. And then on the other side, what do people need to include themselves in a job context? Because most people, if we work with a refugee or a single mom or maybe a trans person or an older person, they often have never worked on a formal job. So they've been in the informal job market, never with a contract. So their ways of working can be quite different. And that can make it hard for them to succeed even in an interview. So we learn how to like prepare them really, really well. And so like in the back of my mind, I was also always thinking, how can we find a good way to monetize this, but not to just monetize something? Because we could have said like, let's become a consultancy giving training to companies. They're like, I don't want that. That is not going to achieve scale. That's not how we're going to reach millions of people and companies. So we have to find a monetization model that is smarter, And it took us quite some time because in Mexico, there is not a lot of willingness to pay for these issues in general. So I would say that a big turning point came when I said, okay, to scale this, we have to have a tech and I think in some sense an algorithm that is able to make the connection between these kinds of diverse candidates and jobs in a really good way. So I started searching. I said, for sure there is something, but I found nothing that I really liked. I saw the algorithms in job boards and applicant tracking systems. I thought, that's not good quality in matching candidates and jobs. It's not just very biased, it's also very, I'd say like the results tended to have very poor quality. So I found a project that had nothing to do with this, but where this Nobel Prize-winning economist, Al Roth, worked with a lot of different professors to build an algorithm where I felt like that looks a bit like what I have in mind. I contacted them. This professor that worked with him just answered. We started talking. We were very excited. We started building a first algorithm, with Python and Excel to test our ideas. And then he said, this is making sense. I'm going to bring a PhD onto this. And that is where I met Marcella, who is now my partner, who's an expert in building AI and ML models. And like with that, we really started saying, okay, like how do we build models that are entirely different from what exists on the market, but that are not just incredibly good and being unbiased, but are also extremely efficient. So we are offering a lot of value to companies that really changes the way they recruit, right? So like, we're not just saying they become more inclusive, we're also saying your hiring is becoming cheaper, it's becoming more efficient, we're liberating your time, and we can really make a dent in the industry there. And that was really how we started shaping the Intrare that we then started last year.
So that's really quite fascinating. So you see an issue where migrants come into countries, but they're unemployed, and you want to find a way to integrate them into the societies, right? And they're everywhere. Migrants are everywhere in the world, right? Or people coming into different countries, and they always have this barrier of how do I get integrated into society, get employable? How do I upskill to the requirements of industry? So you're looking at industry and what they're looking for. You have to change their mindset as well, or educate them, I guess, in the value of having this workforce availability, this talent. And then on the migrant side or the immigrant side, you have to look at changing or helping educate them into how to prepare them to match with what corporates need and things like that. And then you find this research that a professor did, right? And quite a famous. Did you say he won a Nobel Prize or?
Yeah.
So he's like a wow. And so you have a professor who has theory, won a Nobel Prize in economics, and you were able to convert that into an algorithm, right?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with, or we are working with one of his collaborators on this project, who was one of those persons that was really crucial in building the kind of algorithm. I think it's important here to say, I feel like a lot of people that go into AI see it as something very broad. But
Right.
mostly, if you want to solve a specific problem, you have to understand what types of models are the right ones for you. I think it's interesting because there we really were quite on point. We got so lucky to starting to work with them because they had precisely the kinds of models that we needed to start with. Yeah.
So that's really fascinating. So the professor then is an advisor still with your group or a mentor?
Exactly. The professor, so he is an advisor. The PhD that's with him is my partner. And now around that, we have been building this whole advisory board, so we are working with Swati Gupta, who is really important. She's at MIT. She's been doing a lot of work in fairness in AI, but she's quite experienced also in recruitment. And she's one of the persons where like I every time I talk to her, I get my mind blown because she's so brilliant in finding very specific tweaks to models that help us achieve our objectives better. And I think I think that's a really great way to build.
So Hannah, so I'm brainstorming with you, right? And you know, these interviews go across these different platforms. Do you think we could do a panel with your Nobel Prize winner? Because you codified his work, right? And with the PhD who actually did the conversion, and then as an MIT specialist was able to do the tweaks. So can we do an interview panel with the team there? Because what you've done is you've taken a world-class work and you've got world-class teams working with you with your world-class idea to address a really big problem. And are you still working with IOM or are they must are I mean, because you've got a solution.
Yeah, we do. And we're working on implementing this better with the UN because they are not the first ones to adopt tech, but definitely I think that would be brilliant. And just to clarify, like we're not working with the Nobel laureates. We're working with one of the professors that's his collaborator or that was his collaborator on this project. Um yeah, but I think those people are absolutely brilliant and I agree with you. I think the way they build solutions to me has been really fascinating. And I think there is a huge missing link between
Right,
impact problems and building AI for that. And I
right.
think that's just not the same thing as saying let's use AI solutions like OpenAI for impact problems. That's fine. That's really good and important. But those are two totally different things, you know. And I think, and for sure, you've seen this as well. The potential for building AI specifically for creating social impact is absolutely incredible.
I mean, that's what you're doing. You're the founder and CEO of Intrare, and it's a startup and startup because I'm an entrepreneur as well, and I'm an investor in the startup space, and you have to be resilient and agile and be used to volatility. And I can see all the pieces of your background, your hard work, striving, want to be challenged, having an open mind, and willing to continually learn and be curious. You have all of these elements that make for a successful founder. And so you built a startup in Trari, and you got novel AI, definitely not novel, because you got the best work in the world from a collaborative Nobel Prize winner in economics that has these kind of models that you can use, but you need to put tech behind it. And so you're working with these different algorithms and spreadsheets and things. And finally, the collaborator says, well, I think you need a PhD here. Right? So, and so you get this machine learning AI expert, and then you've got this expert at MIT on the bias and so on to fine tune it. And so you got this software as a service solution that empowers companies to hire without bias at a new level of efficiency for them. So it makes economic sense for them too. So it's not just it does good, but it has economic sense and efficiency. And God, I'm just thinking of partners I can probably introduce you to now. Now that I understand what you're trying to do, and um, at least do an introduction where you would like explore further. Maybe they can work with you. One that I can think of is Choco Valley Up. He's part of the Soda Group. He's Soda Group family, and he's created this platform to hire me. But I could see integration between what you're doing and what he's doing. And in fact, his team, um, there is an X Prize skill contest, and his team was the finalist in this X Prize. In fact, if it was pure performance, they would have won. So I could see what he's doing and what you're doing, and he's a big thinker, and he's a very good person from an AI for good standpoint. So that's really fascinating. I'm doing too much talking here because I'm really interviewing you. I'm just kind of processing what you're doing. Did I say anything wrong here, or is everything sort
Not
of
at
right?
all. No, and I would love that. I think, yeah, connecting to people that are connected to that kind of work, I think that's absolutely incredible because I think for me, that's been the best way to get inspired. And as like a way build bigger, but also it's not all about what I'm building. I think in the end, when we start collaborating with other people, it just creates new ideas or helps them. So I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, I had a list of prizes that I offered to the ITU when I was the grand finale judge at AI for Good, right? So I'll reach into that basket, and I think some of them will be valuable for you. An interview was one of them, by the way. Um, I very much respect what you're doing. So you advise on AI projects and working with companies. You're something part of something called Women in AI. What's that? Describe what Women in AI is.
I'm actually just starting. So that's an organization that really wants to create network and support for women that are working in AI. And I think it's like, of course, it's still like a more male dominated sector. But I think what also happens is that a lot of women don't feel the confidence or don't feel like they can go into it. And then
Right.
when you are in it, might feel a little alone. I think actually in Mexico, I only know one other woman that is building AI first, which like that's telling. That's not good. That's not a lot. So I approached them and I said like I want to be part of this and help you. So like now I'm looking into how to start setting up what I can with them here in Mexico City. And for me, the goal is to build community because I think often what people need is to know like-minded people and have this community where you support each other, you inspire each other, you understand each other's problems, you can connect other persons to the right people. And like personally, I don't want to limit myself, of course, only to women, but I think it's really great to start with that because that's a group that I think is still lacking more connection.
Yeah, and there's a gentleman that I know. His name is Steve Nuri, and for years I've been on the board, one of the boards of ACM, and a past chair and things like that. And I introduced Steve Nuri into the ACM because he's built this community called AI for Diversity. I think there's like 300,000 that are part of that. Um, I'll talk to Steve if he's interested in working with you. So that could be something that could be useful. I'm also embedded in IEEE entrepreneurship. So IEEE has created this community of entrepreneurs, and it just so happens in my fund, Joanne Long, she's the chair of IEEE entrepreneurship, and Andy, who's another IEEE leader. In fact, he's the incoming president of System Council. They have now created the first summit, almost like a forum for IEEE entrepreneurship. And I'm keynoting there. And I'm also part of the Roundtable Student Investors and invited startups. What I can do is um, I can't promise that the committee will invite you, but I'll present you to the committee to see if you'll be one of the invited startups. I think we're only inviting 20 startups. And then we're inviting maybe 20, 25 investors, something like that, and doing roundtables where you'll get this kind of exposure. And it's our first conference, like our first summit on the IEEE entrepreneurship side. I'm actually leading something similar within ACM, but it's not quite as mature as the IEEE one. Um, but I'm just kind of actively brainstorming. I'll see if I can plug you into that. A good friend of mine is a leader in this community called YPO and impact investor. But he's a founder of their impact investment network in this private CEO community. So I'll talk to him. I'll do that by showing the interview, and I'll plug it into these different communities I'm part of. But again, I'm taking up too much time. So I know you speak and write about AI for good or an AI product design and bias, definitely diversity, equity, inclusion, leadership, migration, climate change. We're in the last few minutes, and unfortunately, I got another meeting coming up. So, do you have any sort of areas you want to talk about in those um, other roles that you have? And then after that, I'll ask you one final question, and that's the recommendation to the audience. and also maybe questions you want to leave the audience. So sort of a combination of the two. So first of all, is there any more that you want to mention about Intrare and how you're scaling, or about some of the other work that you do that's related to AI and Remedy that we haven't covered? But if we got about 5 minutes max, right? So.
Okay, I'll be very brief. Yeah. So I think one about Intrare is that like we really made a pretty big jump, I would say, like from the organization that we had in the beginning to what we are doing now. Is that we actually launched what 7 weeks ago, we finally launched our SaaS product for companies. That is now incorporating our new AI model. So that's been really exciting. For me as a founder entrepreneur, it's also been a journey where now I'm going full on into, into sales, into looking into a little B2B marketing. So it's really interesting to be at that step. But what I think is great is that we're seeing that what we're offering is really helping companies. And I think it goes into like a wider HR trend. So in the end, what we offer is that you can use our AI in a super simple way. I call it like as if it were a chat GPT for filtering candidates. So like making it very easy. You could upload a lot of PDFs or in Excel with candidate data, and like it all automatically goes through it, may ask you additional questions, and then we give you a listing of the best candidates, why they're the best candidates, and then from there you can manage it all. And of course, we're working a lot on developing new AI models all the time, right? And I think from my perspective, I also see a lot of ways in not just selling this directly to companies, but like I would like to transform as many hirings as possible with this, because taking out the bias in a hire has just such a profound impact for everybody. And it's so much better for the business as well. So they're working on lots of ideas that we won't implement right away, but like being able to plug in directly into applicant tracking systems, where we've actually had interest already from applicant tracking systems themselves that don't have any models like that. So we're really focusing on being the best in class in that, which I think is really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a group called the CEO Leadership Alliance, and they're working on a talent initiative on AI. And I'm plugged into that group, and then they've expanded to a national talent collaborative. So I'll share the interview with them to see if there's interest, and I can do an introduction. There's another group called the Knowledge Impact Network, where I'm an advisor, led by a serial CEO entrepreneur. That's where they give you mentorship, and they try to help you in your journey. So I think there's a fit there. Is your tech stack Microsoft, or is it non-Microsoft? If it's Microsoft, then there's something I could suggest as well.
We are using Microsoft as well. Yeah.
So Microsoft has something called Microsoft for Startups. And there's a Microsoft Startup Founders Hub. I'd recommend then you apply. There's an application process, and then they'll qualify you. Providing you meet their requirements, then once you're on the inside, then you get access to up to $350,000 worth of business tech capabilities, and up to $150,000 worth of Azure credits. And you get access to mentors and advisors and people. And I'm on the inside as a mentor, advisor, investor. And then they have these private programs, which even give you more. It's by invitation only though. So once they know you, get to know you, how you are, then they have another called Pegasus, where you get much more in-depth help and support. And I'm part of that program as well as a Pegasus champion. So it doesn't cost anything to apply, and it's non-dilutive. In other words, all of the services they provide don't take away equity or things like that from you. So they're like grants. So I'd recommend you do that. Okay, we have one question left, and I just wanted to get that in, some ideas to help you go forward. What sort of final recommendation you want to leave to the audience, or maybe questions to the audience?
Yeah, I think as an overall thought, I think in the space of HR and inclusion, AI is still seen as something that's very much integrating open AI into chatbots and into very simple solutions, or giving you data analysis, but not being very rigorous and telling you why it's good. Like, why is this saying that this employee is going to perform in that way, or that one is going to drop out in less than a year? And there I would just like to leave people with that thought of like, how can we all be more serious about this and be a bit more rigorous in asking, like, are those really good systems, and are those really helping us beyond giving us the impression that they are saving costs and making us more efficient? Are they really good for our organizations? Because there is so much potential, and I think we can we can achieve it if we push AI to where it should be.
Well, you're definitely a model for doing all of this. So, Hannah, I really enjoyed our conversation today. You're very inspiring, and I just really appreciate all of the history that you're bringing to this, and the endurance and the resilience, and the scholarship, and more. And just, of course, wish you great success. And thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with my audience.
Thank you so much, Stephen. This was really interesting, and you are a very inspiring person. So I'm really glad that we got to have this chat.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.